Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Pcf Group Plc Annual General Meeting. Throughout this recorded meeting, attendees online will be in listen-only mode. Questions are encouraged and can be submitted at any time via the Q&A tab situated just on the right-hand corner of your screen. Please simply type in your questions and press send. The company may not be in a position to answer every question submitted today. However, all questions submitted online will be reviewed with responses published on the Investor Meet Company platform where it is appropriate to do so. I'll now like to hand you over to Chairman Simon Moore. Good morning to you, sir.
Thanks, Jake. Morning, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us today. Welcome to all shareholders to the 2022 Annual General Meeting of the Pcf Group. My name is Simon Moore. I'm an Executive Director of the company, Non-Executive Director of the company. The Board of Directors asked me to be Chairman for today's AGM. So those of you who've attended these meetings before will know that there is a formal part of the day, which we'll enter into first. After the formal part of the day is concluded, I'll open up the floor for general questions from shareholders. With me today are the Executive Directors, Non-Executive Directors Mark Brown, Christine Higgins, Mark Sisney-Durrant and David Thomas, and our Executive Directors Gary Strang and Caroline Richardson. Unfortunately, our Non-Executive Director David Morgan has sent his apologies. It's now 10 o'clock, time to get going. As we have a quorum, I declare the meeting open. You will have received a notice to the AGM on the 2nd of March, and as we did announce at the time, we don't have a financial report and accounts of 2021 ready to put before the shareholders yet, but this is our annual general meeting and we do have formal business to be concluded. So with the shareholders' permission, I'll take the notice of the meeting as read. Thanks very much. Just to run through the process, how we're going to do this today, a little bit different to before. Voting today will be by way of poll. There'll be no voting by show of hands. It gives all shareholders the opportunity to vote in proportion to the number of shares they hold and gives the company better insight into the shareholders' intentions. In terms of the procedure, summary of the resolutions will be shown on the screen in front of us and online, together with a breakdown of the proxy votes that we've received. It'll take a little time to complete the poll procedure and to count the votes, but once we've done that, gather them in, the final results will be posted on the Regulatory Information Service and our website as soon as practical. Each shareholder has been given a poll card, which you've got 3 different options. 1, you can vote for the resolution, 2, vote against the resolution, or 3, abstain. Or if you choose, you can withhold your vote, which is not a vote in law and won't be calculated in the final calculation. When you complete your poll card, please tick the appropriate box next to the relevant resolution. And then once the votes have you've completed ticking your boxes, please sign your poll card. And I'll ask the company secretary to gather them in. If you need any help with that, please ask, and I'll be happy to do so. So turning to the purpose of today's AGM, we have a total of 11 resolutions. The first 9 of those resolutions are ordinary resolutions requiring a simple majority in favour. There are 3 groups. Resolutions 1 to 4, inclusive, are to elect me, Simon Moore, Mark Sisney-Durrant, Caroline Richardson and Gary Strang as directors of the company, because they've been appointed since the last annual general meeting. Group 2 resolutions 5 to 8, inclusive, which is to re-elect Mark Brown, Christine Higgins, David Morgan and David Thomas, who are retiring as directors of the Corporate Governance Code and are seeking re-election. And resolution 9 is to authorise the directors to allot ordinary shares in the capital of the company up to a maximum nominal amount of approximately 1/3 of the total issued capital. Resolution 10 is a special resolution which will require a majority of not less than 75% of the votes cast of the company. Resolution 10 is to disapply pre-emption rights on the allotment of ordinary shares in the company up to a maximum nominal amount of approximately 5% of the total issued ordinary share capital of the company. And then the final resolution, resolution 11, will only be passed if it's approved by a majority of at least 66% of the votes cast, as required under the Capital Requirements Directive 4 for the financial services industry. And resolution 11 is to authorise the company to apply a ratio between fixed and variable components of total remuneration of remuneration code staff that exceeds 1:1, provided the ratio does not exceed 1:2. Full details of all those resolutions are in the notice of the AGM and the accompanying notes. So that's the purpose of the meeting and the procedure of the meeting. What I want to do now is to take questions specifically on those resolutions, and we'll use the same grouping as I described earlier. So ordinary resolutions 1 to 4 to elect the new directors. We have had no questions in advance of the meeting. Tim, have we had any questions?
Nope.
Now on those resolutions? No, thanks so much. On the second group, resolutions 5 to 8 to re-elect retiring directors. Again, we've had no questions in advance of the meeting. And we have no questions today either. Resolution 9 to authorise the directors to allot ordinary shares. Again, we've had no questions in advance and no questions now either. Resolution 10, this is the special resolution to apply disapply preemption rights. No questions in advance. No questions now. And finally, resolution 11 to adjust the maximum remuneration ratio. We've had no questions in advance.
Nope.
And no questions today. Good. In that case, we'll move directly to the poll. We won't go through each resolution as I set out before, but we're now asking the shareholders to complete their poll cards on all 11 resolutions. So formally, I declare the poll open. And just to remind you, please tick the appropriate box against each resolution, for or against, or abstain, or withhold, and then sign the poll card when you're complete. So I'll give everyone a few moments to do that. All is safely gathered in? Thanks. In that case, I declare the poll closed. On the screen in front of us here, and I think online as well, we can confirm that proxy votes received for each resolution is received by the company. Over 95% of the proxy votes received have been in favour of the resolutions. The poll cards are now being counted, and as I said at the beginning of this meeting, the final voting results will be announced through the Regulatory Information Service and published on our website as soon as we practically can do that. That concludes the formal business of the meeting, and I formally declare the annual general meeting closed. However, as promised at the beginning of the meeting, we do have some time for you to ask any general questions for the next 15 minutes or so, either here in the room or online. So, Tim, let me know. Have you got any questions?
We've got some questions, yeah.
Excellent.
We've got a couple of questions regarding the upcoming results from Simon T. Is the estimate for the end of May for the results still valid? Has there been any further delay? And at the general meeting in February, were the board aware that there was likely to be a further suspension? It was announced just 11 days after the general meeting.
Gary, would you like to take the second half of that first, and then Caroline, perhaps you can comment on the actual results?
Yeah, so in terms of the second part of the question, clearly the team knew that it was a tight schedule that we were working to. We were exploring all the avenues to deliver those results on time. And as soon as that became apparent that that wouldn't be possible, we made the appropriate announcements, as you would have seen. So we weren't aware of it, no. We were aware that it was tight, but both internally and working with McIntyre Hudson, we were doing our very best to meet that deadline.
Okay, thank you. Right, do you want to comment on the actual first part of the question on the results themselves?
Yes, we continue to work well with our new auditors, and we're still working towards that end of May timeline. It's the best endeavours towards that timeline. So yes.
Okay,
And if we thought it wasn't achievable, we'd have to announce it.
It would.
Yeah, just to say on a general point that any announcements that we've made remain valid until we make new announcements which make them not valid. And so I think shareholders should be aware that the board are very aware of their obligations in respect of that.
Thank you, Gary. Tim?
This is addressed to you, Simon. Can the chair, and as far as he can, and as far as appropriate, make a comment on the relationship with Summers?
All I can say about that is Summers continue to be as supportive as Summers always have been, and remain a solid and dependable shareholder. And I have a very positive relationship.
Thank you. Question regarding the new auditors. It's aimed at Christine. Are you aware of any changes to Caroline might want to comment on this as well? Are you aware of any changes to the accounting process, interpretation or application of accounting standards the new auditors will apply, or that will either delay the 2021 accounts or make the next accounts presented on a different basis?
Was that specifically to one director?
It was addressed to Christine, but Caroline might have some thoughts on it.
Christine, you want to start?
I'm going to pass to Caroline just to start on the sort of technical aspects of the question.
And so our accounting policies are largely unchanged, and we would expect the basis of accounts to be the same. So we're not aware of any large changes at this point. Still relatively early days in the audit process. We're a bank, and there's always areas of focus for an audit of a bank around impairment and interest recognition under EIR, and I'd expect those to be the same focus areas for the new audit as they were in previous years.
So I just add that from my point of view and the audit committee's point of view, there's a good relationship with Beckenham Hudson, which continues, and on the basis of no surprises. So that's how we're seeing it at the moment. There are no surprises.
Thanks, Christine.
Another question. Ernst & Young, in their opinion, referred to indicators of fraud. It is still unclear to shareholders what actually went wrong. Was there, in the board's opinion, actual criminality, or was it solely a systems and process failure?
Yeah, I will. When we use the term criminality, we have to be very careful. Okay, as far as the board are aware at this moment in time, there are no matters of criminal fraud which are the board is aware of at this point. The indicators of fraud can be taken in a couple of ways. One is the common law definition of fraud, and the other one is around the accounting standard which defines fraud. So if the question is about criminality, the answer is that currently at this moment in time, there is nothing before the board which suggests criminality. Does that answer that in full, Tim?
I think it's worth, just from my point of view, referring back to the narrative in the 2020 ARA, and in particular the Audit and Risk Committee report, where we've talked about a couple of areas which are relevant to this question, I think. So one of the points made in the ARA is that there were indicators of members of the historical finance team under instruction manually adjusting certain accounting entries for reporting purposes, which appeared to the board to be a deliberate effort to facilitate specific results. And the other point made in the committee report is that the board believed there may have been possible collusion by some members of the historical finance team in making these adjustments. So that's how the committee and the board sees it, and we are working on that basis.
Thank you, Christine, for reminding us of the disclosure very last year. Thanks, Tim.
I've got a question from Paul on Azul, asking, is Azul a sustainable future business area for PCF?
Off you go.
Yeah, Azure, depends what people mean by a sustainable business area. The bank made a strategic decision to buy Azure because it's a specialist in the broadcast and media section in terms of its ability to broker deals and also introduce deals to the bank to lend on its own balance sheet. It is acknowledged as a market leader, and it's been unfortunate that because of all of the events that people are aware of, probably the strategic direction of Azure has been disproportionately impacted compared to the rest of the business. There is no doubt that we have a very skilled team in Azure, and part of the work that we're undertaking is to look at how best we can leverage those skills to be very clear that Azure is the brokerage arm of PCF Bank, not a lending arm, and secondly, how we can develop those skills, maybe take it into other areas as well as broadcast and media. So the current view of Azure is that it is an asset to the business which can be further developed to add value to the overall group, and it's an integral part of the strategy.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
A couple of follow-up questions on the accounts publication, and whether you mentioned that the deadline for March was tight. Asking how was it tight if the delays of 2 months, if you thought you could get it done in that period?
Shall I give what I see as the strategic answer to that? One of the issues with it being tight was quite simply this: we had new auditors. It was a first-year audit, and a first-year audit is always naturally more difficult, more time-consuming. The second issue is that the audit started later than you would normally expect because of the delay in the preceding year's accounts and the resignation of EY. And so against any backdrop, it was always going to be a schedule which is tighter than normal in a situation where with new auditors it had the potential to be more complex than usual. So I think that's my sort of strategic overview of it, and I don't know if Caroline or Christine wants to add to that.
I think all I would add is that in a new auditor situation, you expect them to be starting their procedures at least 3 months before the end of the year. Ours were appointed 3 months after the year end, and therefore it was always going to be a challenging first year audit cycle in terms of time.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. Thanks, Tim.
We also have a question which on the 2019 board effectiveness review, and how that process played out, and your thoughts on that process in hindsight.
Well, I mean, the only comment I can make on that, having not been there, is that we will be running a board effectiveness review when the time is right this year. And I think it's the look forward element that I think is important. We've got a new board. We're looking forward to new executive team, new non-executive team, and we're building that board as we speak now. In terms of the effectiveness in the past, I think it's almost irrelevant, but is anyone, colleagues who were there, wish to comment on the board effectiveness review from the past?
No, just to say we did do a board effectiveness review. It was undertaken by an external party, and it was a very positive review with some recommendations which were followed up.
Okay. Thanks, Christine. Thanks, Tim.
And that's all the questions.
Excellent. Well, there being no more questions, I'll draw that to a conclusion. Thank you everybody for attending. And if you need to travel home, I wish you a safe journey.
Tim, that's great. And thank you very much indeed to the board for taking the time to update investors today. Could I please ask attendees not to close this session, as you'll now be automatically redirected for the opportunity to provide your feedback in order that the board can better understand your views and expectations. This will only take a few moments to complete, and I'm sure will be greatly valued by the board. On behalf of the board of PCF Group Plc, we would like to thank you for attending today's presentation, and good afternoon to you all.